Oh, wow, we're live, just like that. It works 60% of the time. That's not true. It always works. It's a Google tool, right? So it's Tuesday, everyone. Happy Tuesday to everybody who's watching this video and everybody who's on the call, feeling that lovely Tuesday vibe of whatever the hell you get on a Tuesday, which to me I think is just a lot like Monday, but with some different letters in the word. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off August 28th, 2018. And we don't have a whole lot to go through, but we'll kind of go through what we can. And if any questions or queries come in the Slack or on Twitter or wherever else, we'll try to field those while we're doing this. Otherwise, just keep opening issues and we'll keep triaging them. So let me go ahead and share my application window here. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah? Rad.
Yeah.
Sweet. I may actually just resize this a little bit because what we actually care about is this left side of this window. Sweet. Cool. So we're going to start with builder number 613. Builder is unaware of package target x86-64 Linux kernel 2. And Mr. Scott McFarland.
Yeah, I'll talk about that real quick. I'm amending it right now because I'm in the process of redacting my credentials to give you the full debug output log. But the short version is working on the kernel 2 variants, trying to upload a package, and it does not know what that target is yet. So I suspect that builder just needs to be rebuilt against the core crate and redeployed.
Yeah, I'll add a comment. I believe what's going on in our in the API code is this idea of different targets came up later. So we have this like fallback of last resort that if we can't match or figure out what your package target is, you meant to tell us that it was 64-bit Linux. So instead of like returning an error to the user, we're actually just saying that and like giving you back that. So most likely that's at least what you're tripping over. At a minimum. So I will add that because I believe Salim and I both noticed that.
That actually is open as well. There's another issue, I think, right after this one.
Okay.
That talks about that.
Sweet, yeah. So this is going to go in the backlog. This is a builder issue. This is likely, I don't know if it's like chore or feature.
I'd say feature. I mean, it's the implementation is going to be pretty light, I think. It's not a bug. We're adding new functionality.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I would actually call this emergent as well. And where do we put that? Builder feature. Look at that. Now
yeah, as I read this, Seth, I did get confused between these two. So yeah, you're right to break these out.
Also,
Scott.
Yes.
I think I was hanging out with too many Seths last week. I apologize.
I get called Seth all the time. It's okay.
I don't think I've ever done that with you. At least I hope not. Well, that's fun.
That's a Jamie thing. If Jamie were here, he'd probably still do it intentionally. All right, cool. We'll go ahead and move on to on-prem builder number 92. This came up this morning, and I think actually, I think Josh and I were on the call with John here, and basically what was going on is he had a customer who had an on-prem deployment of builder that when he was trying to populate it with servers, we do some kind of curl stuff in the scripts we use for populating and seeding the server with packages. And we got kind of a generic curl response of failed writing body with size doesn't match the expected size. It's because they ran out of space, right? And so you can kind of see this, you can duplicate this behavior with curl if you run out of space, or if you've got curl piped into something and the pipe closes before it has a chance to complete, you can get these weird errors. The discussion we had about it was just like, we have a bunch of safety checks inside of those scripts, but we thought it might be nice to add another guard that like just checks for disk space to make sure that we've got a solid like 10 gigs. Because I think the package right now, Josh, I don't know if you recall, was it like 9.5 gigs for that tarball?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, so it'd probably be a good thing that we could just do quality of life wise. So so I'm going to go ahead and add that into the backlog as well. Oh, whoa. Look at that. Oh, we need to add our labels to this repo, apparently. So,
interesting.
Indeed. I'm going to add that as a chore and builder. I'll just throw that in there. Just make sure it's in the backlog. And that should be good for now. Go ahead. Move on. So next one's going to be habitat number 5516, 5,516. It's a lot of issues, a whole lot. And this is another one by Mr. Scott McFarland. So I don't know if you want to talk to this, Scott, or if you'd rather me just kind of wing it.
Yeah, so this is similar to the one we just looked at. Basically, when hitting the latest endpoint to figure out what the latest package is, when you're dealing with a variant or dealing with a package target that Builder is not aware of, it always goes, oh yeah, you want a Linux package, and then it'll try to download and install, and the build process will fail, which is not ideal. So this one, there's two routes to solving this, one on Builder and one in the CLI. I opened this one on the CLI because I think that the Builder one's going to be a much longer solve because there's some ramifications around changing that behavior. This one just is always specifying in the URL the desired target, so that Builder will just kind of say, nope, I don't know about that, and return no packages.
Yeah, if I recall, I think that most of those validations for those targets and everything is actually happening in the client. I may be misremembering because it's been a minute now, but I'm pretty sure so long as it has a target, at least from the backend perspective, the server doesn't really care. It's just like, does this thing that you're asking for exist? Or if you're uploading, usually it's just basically like, give me the target, and depending on how that target is written and available, we just kind of write to that path in Minio. So hopefully this is not something that involves like a whole lot of effort, really, but I'm going to throw it in the backlog because it's something we really need to do.
So yeah, there is a little bit of Builder's assumptions based on like how we've configured it lead it to not do the right thing. So partly like we can configure Builder to add this new package target. I think that's Scott's first issue, should address that. The next one is the server tries to parse out the package target that you want from our user agent. That was kind of the first default behavior, and we should probably seek to get rid of that, although it shouldn't get in the way as long as that actually lines up with a legit target. It'll also like look, I think it preferentially looks to see if there's a param of target. So if we always set it, it'll always use that, and then we can at least avoid the user agent code path, and then probably look to get rid of it. But
yeah,
that's
so I'll speak to the next bit when we get to the next issue on Builder. There's a little bit more to that I talked about with Elliot this morning.
Cool. Let's go ahead and look at that.
Here.
Number 612.
Yeah, so this is the other side of that. So when you specify a user agent that Builder doesn't aware of, it goes, actually, you meant x86-64 Linux, didn't you? Which gets us into behavior that you don't really expect. Like if you're on a Windows platform trying to figure out what the latest Windows package is, you're going to get Linux packages if you don't specify a target, which feels wrong to me. The problem that Elliot raised with this is that It sounds like we are using this behavior in some of our curl scripts for the on-prem depot, which Josh may be able to verify, which means that making this change is going to potentially break people. So this is a bit of a longer process.
Yeah, this assumption has been around for kind of a long time, at least a year and a half. And
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
so, and I mean, it's served us well up until now. But yeah, there's probably a bit of work too.
The one thing we'll probably want to do whenever we land this is make sure there's a very clear error code coming back with a reasonable message, so that at least we'll probably be able to warn people. This will just come down to like a builder deployment, which we could probably say, if we need to give people a week or a month or however long for this, we should be able to do that, because that's just server side. And again, as long as all of our clients are passing in target, or that whatever that param is, we will start to avoid this code path. It'll just be good to get rid of it, because admittedly, this confused the heck out of me for a few hours when I started looking into this.
Yeah.
I could not figure out how in the world our client was communicating this to the server, and it turns out, yeah, the server was just peeking around in places to figure it out on its own.
Yeah. Well, let's get this in. Let's do this. It's gonna be great. I think that for anybody that's like watching the stream, or anybody who watches these recordings of these videos afterwards, I'd like to take a second to just talk through why these issues are here and what the hell we're talking about, because it can get easy. It's really easy from the outside, if you're looking into an open source project, it's really easy to miss what exactly this means. And what this boils down to is we are effectively, Scott and Fletcher have done a massive amount of work to push us towards supporting other package targets aside from just x86 64 Linux with our preferred the preferred kernel for the Habitat project and Windows, right? So all of this work that we're kind of talking about here is kind of the ground floor for making sure that we can support maybe older Linux kernels or other alternative package targets in the future. So that's all really exciting work, but I just wanted to make sure we framed it so people understand what it is that we're actually working towards there. Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to Habitat 5510. All right, I'll give everybody a second to read this. Hab package exec argument parsing with spaces. So I haven't tested this myself, but I definitely trust.
I tested it out. It seems valid.
Yep.
Yeah.
It looks like that seems reprobable, and I would not be surprised. I think there has actually been some reasonably good updates in our CLI parser library that we use. I have figured out a better way around, I think, the original implementation for how this works. I think there's a much better way, and that might eliminate this edge case problem. In essence, we just need to, after a certain point in that series of tokens, we just need to pass the rest off to the program that's going to do the work, and just have that be the arguments for the exec call. But it was really brutally hard to figure out how to do that the first time, and I don't think there was. It wasn't sufficiently easy at the time we did it the first time.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I would assume, with all of that in mind, this is something that we will likely end up working. I will say, again, for viewers or people who are looking for ways to get involved in Rust and stuff like that, this might be a bug that would be a good thing for a new contributor to consider looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say for certain that it's not going to be hard, but I can say that like the CLI code, as far as like the project goes, the CLI code is pretty concise. It's pretty easy to get involved in, and things like argument parsing with spaces, like that's going to lean really heavily on clap, the clap library, which is what we use for all of that. So it might be the kind of thing that it could be just like a great little PR if you have an interest in doing it. For now, I'm putting it in our backlog. I'm not going to flag it with help wanted, but like all of our code, if you have an interest in working on any of these things, we would love to facilitate that. So you can always DM any of us on the core team in Slack if you want to get started or you don't know how to get started. And then of course we have our contributing MD file, which should have a lot of information on how to get involved with the project. So let's go ahead and move on to 5509. Yeah, I think this might be a duplicate of a known issue, but it also might not.
I'm pretty sure that's covered under existing issues for UX improvement. There's been a lot of discussion around exactly how we all want this to work, and I think we have that set aside.
Cool. Do we want to keep this open as a tracking issue for that then, or is there another number we can close this in favor of?
We have a better tracking issue. I just need to find that one.
Cool. John, if you wouldn't mind, when you find it, would you just post that in here with a link and then close this one out? Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Builder 610. Ooh, this is an exciting one. So we've had a lot of discussions around this. Yeah.
I've missed most of those discussions likely, but yeah, it sure makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think this is definitely something we want to do.
Yeah,
I think on our first pass of creating these APIs, sometimes you're not really sure where the hotspots are and where the most used things are, and a lot of times you're just extending one thing from the other. And I have a feeling that's probably how this sort of fell out from a, oh, I would like to know information about this particular package, please, and then getting sort of all the info back. And my guess is that's why we returned so much information on this call, which has this latest endpoint is effectively when you're telling the supervisor to look for package updates, or if the supervisor is told to self-update, it's effectively like hitting these like a package item / latest on a regular interval. And in our effort to be like accurate and timely, we still don't really catch that very much. So you're getting a pretty like real-time answer. This ends up making this request a little more on the expensive side, but it's also a very like frequently accessed item. So it's super interesting that like this is a pretty important endpoint, but we may not have really pre-guessed that at the time.
Yeah, I think there's been some effort recently to kind of try to implement like some using maybe mem caching for this. But this is like aside from caching, we had the discussion of the cost of making this kind of query against the API that we have today is kind of high, not because it takes much to like just return the latest version, but because when we make that query against that API, we're returning the entire package manifest, which is a much larger request. Yeah. So yeah, all in all, like there are several things happening in this space. But I do think having maybe a new API or a lighter API that's like, just give us this tiny bit of data that we want instead of returning the entire manifest is probably the right path forward. I think that also helps with some of the things that we have experience with Builder and our users have experience with Builder of if we get inundated with requests against latest, a whole bunch of requests against latest, sometimes things can start slowing down. So this is a good one. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Builder 608. I have not seen this one yet. So I'll give everybody a moment to read it.
That's funny. I just ran into this lovely, like literally just 2 minutes ago.
As soon as I saw it, it's like, I bet I know what's going on. We have fascisms in there that we didn't know yet.
Yep, that is literally what I was going to say. So yeah, this is something we need to fix. For any of you who are writing habitat plans, you can run into this inside Docker containers. If you set your script interpreter and your run hook to bin bash inside of our exported Docker containers, you're actually getting BusyBox bash. And it's not a full implementation of bash, which means some of the things in your script that you would expect to just work actually will not work. And so it's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah. Were we to do this again from the start, and you can blame me for that, making that decision in how we built BusyBox, I don't believe I would have added the bash-like thing. It would have just been easier for it to error and say, hey, there's no bin bash. Rather than getting a 60% bash-like experience. It's the same thing that frustrates me on some other Linux distributions where, it might not be ash, but it might be dash, but it's just not GNU bash. And it doesn't matter until it does.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, even today, if you do bin sh, and like this goes in multiple directions, right?
Same problems too, yeah.
Yes. If you do bin sh on Ubuntu, you're not getting bash. You're not getting you're not getting like C shell or something. You're getting dash, which is the deviant bash implementation. And it also has some slightly different flags, some slightly different behaviors. Yeah, so that portability, we have, there's a few ways we can fix this. So
ultimately, we should figure out how the supervisor can control that.
Yes.
A bit better. We slipped up a little bit on that. This is one place where running something in production might be slightly different than you expected. When we've controlled for everything else so well, this is still like a bit of an edge in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, we've even talked, just to kind of, I guess, add some flavor to that conversation. We've talked about like what the supervisor could do with these run hooks to kind of make sure that that you have something that's runnable, some way to standardize, and people have done some different things in different ways to kind of get around this. So one of the ways is like just including bash as a dep in your package, and just always having /bin bash, but with package path 4 to refer to the habitat version of bash. So cool. I'll give everybody a moment. This is we're going to move on to 5505. I'll give everybody a second to read that. This is another one I have not seen before.
It's funny that your view does not match what I'm seeing in my web browser.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay. But you're on GitHub, so maybe that's what I should do. I have a feeling there's... That's ZenHub?
Yeah.
This is different.
Oh.
Okay, I can't account for that.
So long as the information is the same, that's all.
Well, that was just it. I didn't see the code bodies, so it looked like it was just a template that somebody didn't fill out.
No, I mean that kind of is what this looks like. Actually, there's not any information in here, so I think that this might be accidental. So I'm actually going to close this one out, James 3 Cardenas. And if you have some more information to add, just feel free to come in and edit the issue and kind of add your information back. One moment. Sweet, those are the easiest ones to triage. Cool, let's go ahead and move on to 5497. Ah, interesting. So I think the idea here is like to be able to maybe export a bunch of depths or a bunch of transitive depths kind of all at once. But I think that doesn't the tar exporter by default today bundle in our transitive depths?
They do, but I think our current design only allows one package identifier as the argument. So what you're exporting like boils down to sort of like one target package and all of its steps. This is kind of different to the decision we made in the Docker exporter, where you could like list a few, like one to many, I guess. So you could say, I want, I don't know, core nginx, and I want core HTTP2, and I want core JQ static or something like that.
Yeah.
And I could definitely see, this being super useful, especially the tar one specifically because of how it can be used. It doesn't necessarily need to have anything runnable in it, but it's a way to kind of deterministically get a bunch of software into a tarball, which you can hop an air gap and get that out in a way that like you've captured everything.
Yeah, I kind of dig this idea, and I, we have a lot of users who are in true air-gapped environments where they do not have network access to machines that they have to run software on, except for when they need to go in and deploy new software. And even then, it's not, you're not talking network access from external to the machine. You're talking like a terminal in a data center somewhere. So I personally would be inclined to accept this issue. I think it's probably safe to add a help wanted label on it right now. I don't know if this is something that is going to get prioritized like to the top of the list on the immediate. Does anybody have any other objectionable feelings about it? Or
that seems probably about right for now. I really appreciate the fact that this person has a workaround which they've also shared, so that it's not a complete, this won't work at all. More like, instead of using the exporter, here's how I solved for it in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is pretty awesome. So thank you to the user who submitted this. I think it's great. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the backlog. We've got all of the labels on it. I have tagged it help wanted for now. That does not mean, again, I kind of always say this when we get a help wanted issue, and I'm going to continue to say it. Just because something is tagged help wanted or not tagged help wanted does not mean that an external contributor or maintainer can't work on it, or vice versa, right? We just put those on there because that's how we can kind of keep track of the things that we have not yet prioritized. And so we have historically also kind of gone back at times and just pulled some of these or closed them out, and we have other work that have completed these features or requests. So, all right, let's go ahead and look at Habitat 5496. Yeah,
I've noticed that too.
that seems like a
yeah. The hard part is the kind of at the end of the day, the successfully loaded. It's a bit more on the aspirational side than it is a complete confirmation. We're getting there, and I just wonder if maybe we lost our nerve writing that unloading message. I think what we're aiming to do is to get this to a state where the client being like this have load and unload is when we're telling you that it did something successfully, that you can kind of count on it. At the moment, there are scenarios where you could get this message saying successfully loaded and then go to the supervisor log, and that may or may not be the case. We have eliminated, if you saw this message, I don't know, 5-6 months ago, it would be potentially even a bit more aspirational than it is now. We have done some work, and this is sort of ongoing work to make the loading, unloading, start, stop experience a little more consistent and
indeed. And I think I saw on the forums just like this morning that CM might have been hacking on some of this. So this could end up getting the successfully loaded message, which is not what this issue is about, could be literal and not aspirational in short order. But I do think it's probably also like makes perfect sense for us to have it in both directions rather than just like, oh, you don't know.
At a minimum, I would consider this just a super design. Like this is part of the design conversation for kind of what we want to do here. So yes, it is good to have this in our backlog.
For sure. Cool. I'll throw that into soup. And that would be it's kind of a feature, I would think. Maybe it's a change. I don't know. Cool. All right, so that's on the backlog, and that's been accepted. So thank you, Ken Langdon, for submitting. I think that's going to be a good quality of life UX thing. Sweet. Moving on to core plans number 1809, libmemcached. So give everybody a second. I think that's probably a pretty reasonable request.
If I understand this would kind of be like a request for a new plan?
I think so. I think it's basically libmemcached as a new Yep. Core origin should also include libmemcached for consumption by language bindings like pylibmc. Yeah. So yeah, we would basically have a new library package. I think that's a reasonable request. But I won't.
Oh, it's going to be fun too.
I'm not going to touch that. I'll throw this out on the backlog. I'll just put this core plans, new plan. I have no idea how difficult that's going to be.
I'd say it's going to be somewhat difficult since if the second comment there, it doesn't build under GCC 7+. We only have GCC 8 and 7 in core plans right now.
Yes. So this one may get put on hold until we can get the rest of the package target stuff done. But, you know, still a good request and definitely doesn't mean that it's not going to get done. So.
And I think like a lot of other stuff in our core plans, I know that we have a really nice growing community of people who enjoy working on plans and hacking on things and doing what you might have thought was impossible. So yeah, as always, if this is in somebody's wheelhouse and they want to take it on, that effort is very much appreciated too.
Oh yeah. All right. Yeah. So this one doesn't require a new package, but also could be some interesting work.
I'm sensing the theme, yes.
Yes, indeed. Somebody needs Sassel. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the backlog as well. I think that this is another pretty reasonable.
Cyrus Sassel, yes. Okay, I'm trying to remember. What was my path to this before? It was like postfix and OpenLDAP and Kerberos and yeah. I've been here before, but it's been a long time.
Some fun stuff in there. Not those technologies you just listed out. Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to Core Plan 1799. It was a wonderful year. Maybe. Probably not realistically, but mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is something that we should definitely talk about because this is like a pain point that lots of people have run into, and I know myself and Fletcher and Scott have all spent some time working on this issue and issues kind of related to this with the CA cert bundles. So the workaround here is a way, right? But like was kind of said, we that only works until the core CA bundle gets updated and then it's broken again. So I don't know necessarily if this is something that can be resolved with the package itself, or if this is something that we have to consider a larger feature for inside of the way that Habitat is using those CA bundles in conjunction with our build program and everything else.
It might be something that if I could imagine that an article or two written around this, it's not going to solve problems, but it's more a matter of listing alternatives and challenges. So there are issues we have with kind of certs in general, like us and just software in general. So for example, if you know that the software you're running happens to be using OpenSSL as the finder and consumer of these certs, then you've got like these magic environment variables of CA cert file and like those kinds of things. That's coming from a specific library though. And likely you can just set that and override it, override the location, and you could probably get what you want. There's other consumers of those certs like Go programs who up to this point will only go and look at preset hard-coded paths for the distribution they were built for. So we're talking like, /etc cert CA, whatever the path is, and there's no reasonable way to override that kind of at runtime. You can kind of influence it at build time, but it depends on how that Go program was made. So there's
and in specific response to the feature request we have here, I think it might be kind of dope to have a plan helper that just lets you take your active cert at build time and just kind of injects it into the cert bundle. And I don't know, like that would in some ways be breaking the atomic behavior of the way that Habitat functions and is deterministic and atomic in its updates. But I am not personally a huge proponent for engineering purity over user experience. So
I believe like the NixOS project and their packages, they have a concept of sort of like package purity, and I believe this is one thing that either is a default or something you can opt in or out of if you want sort of like impure mode, then you're going to sort of your systems certs for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're assuming on you're relying on your distribution to keep those up to date, or infrastructure config management tools to manage custom certs and directories and that kind of thing, and that can work really darn well. This is something, yeah, it is a struggle, is to figure out what are the options. This is kind of an interesting idea as a way to like describe something perhaps in a more global habitat place. Hadn't really occurred to me. It's almost like thinking of what if CA certs was actually a service, which it's not. But what if it was? Well, then you'd have like HAB, SVC, CA certs. Like you'd have service namespace where you could put stuff.
Yeah,
could influence how the thing ran. And that's not exactly what we have here, but maybe there's like an interplay with some configuration. I'm not really sure. It's kind of it is an interesting idea.
I am personally inclined to accept this feature request with the caveat that implementation-wise, it may not look like necessarily like a helper inside the build program or whatever, but I do think we need something in this space because from a developer experience perspective, this sucks. It's like a hard thing. And granted, like to be totally fair to Habitat, this is a hard thing whether or not you're using Habitat. And that's kind of what Fletcher was getting at. But I do think we might be able to, with the kit we have, make this less, painful.
Yeah, agreed there.
So, yeah, I'm kind of inclined to just put it in the backlog with a needs discussion and maybe a help wanted. So this would be a non-trivial feature. I think realistically, we will probably end up having to do this work ourselves. But I do think it might. Some answer for this would be a good value to our users. Does anybody have like strong objections to that? No? Cool. All right, then that's what we'll do. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the backlog. I'm going to add, I think that this is, it's not exactly core plans. It might be closer to plan build. And yeah, so I'm going to throw it under plan build for now, and I'm going to throw it a feature flag. And this will affect pretty much everybody. I don't really know. This could be Rust, or it could be Shell. And then I'm going to add this needs discussion on here because I don't know. I think that this is something that like we will want to actually dig into and think about the solution on because something needs to happen, but it's not something we want to just add. So we don't want to end up in a state where like, yeah, this is now worse than it was before. So I'll go ahead and add that. And I'll also add help wanted for now, just because I don't know if this is going to get prioritized immediately. Again, like I said before, that does not mean that it's not going to get prioritized. So we'll throw that in there. This is definitely a developer experience thing. And we're good. That's a good one. Thank you for submitting that. All right, last one, and then we'll give you all 20 minutes back of your day. This is one that has been open for a little bit, and we've talked about it on the call, and we haven't necessarily triaged it. But we should talk while we have a few more people here and kind of get some folks' feelings and opinions on what this might be. For those of you that are watching, if you're not reading along, effectively the idea is if you've ever used partial configs in any of your web programming languages like Node or whatever templating language, ERB, I can't remember all of them, but you've used config partials where you could have multiple config files and you can include things, static content, you could pull things in from other config files and have those be a little more dynamic. I think that's kind of the request here. If I recall, this thread is also a pretty good one. I think there might be some reasonable content in there worth reading. Yeah, yep. Some really excellent examples. Thank you for the thorough issue submission here. This actually does make it a lot easier to kind of talk through, think about, reason about.
This is even, there's even that like slightly different use case of I can't describe to you the templates for how many versions of this thing that I might have or what it's called. Like based on the configuration, I might have 3 things, and now that means there's going to be config.1, config.2, config.3, rather than how it sort of is right now, which is like you have like these static things that are already set up, so you know how many templates we're going to render through. We're not really like generating any, and they're not inlined into other ones. So that might be a cousin of a similar problem, maybe.
Oh, I think it totally is. Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah, that's basically the paragraph I kind of keyed in on, of like, that is, I believe, something that has come up in the past, and that's been a really hard thing to figure out what the right answer is there. We have no way to describe that right now.
Yep.
We would almost need, I feel like that is getting close to needing something like a programming language or arbitrary code execution in order to generate those. So perhaps that's like maybe what at the end of the day is missing is some lifecycle hook that we haven't yet described that has the ability to generate, I don't know, config files or templates for config files that could be then rendered again or something.
Yeah.
Some of that makes me admittedly a little nervous, but that might, that it would be hard to describe some, doing some of these things, at least generating files, without constructs that are getting you pretty close to programming language in however we would need to expose that. And our kind of escape hatch for that is lifecycle hooks are a way to do that kind of if you need to. But I guess I may have misread. It seems like the majority of this is probably dealing with sort of having partial templating that you can effectively like inline or bring in. So when a template gets rendered out, you sort of get one file, but it might have been composed of partial templates. Or have I misread that?
I think that's correct. I think that's the big part of it. I think it's generally just that like right now it's just the fact that it's just a one-to-one map, right? Like you can't do anything outside of a one-to-one map. Now you can do some weird things, right? Since it's Bash, you can source other shell scripts and package up shell scripts, but that's not actually getting you what you want here, right? Because what you really want is 2 separately templated files that are going to get combined into 1, or 3 separately, or the inverse of that, where you have 1 template that that your hook should template out 3 or 4 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Effectively breaking that one-to-one connection. Now, I am also inclined to accept this with the same kind of validation that we had on the previous issue, which is like, this is something we probably should try to solve, but what this looks like in practice is probably going to be a little heavier duty than like, well, more than likely, it's going to be heavier duty than like a handlebars helper, right?
Right.
Like that would be a really gnarly handlebars helper. It might be great, but we can't really know until we dig into it. Does anybody have objections between about an abstraction like this?
Not super on its face, because I could see how this could be useful. I guess I have a tendency to like immediately like, oh boy, I don't want to give people a programming language and a templating engine just to get a job done if we can avoid it. And I don't think
Yes.
I don't think we're forced to make, that's like I think a bit of a false choice. So I don't think that this puts us in that situation. And I'm not saying I want to take something away from users. I guess what we're looking for, at least at the supervisor and runtime, is providing you the least amount of risk we possibly can at runtime, and all that risk, we just want to shift that to be as much a build time concern as we possibly can.
Yeah.
I guess what we've noticed in practice is there is some stuff around hooks and the templating and config where we'd like to have a little more safety and determinism in there, but there's sometimes a bit more of surprise that happens than we would rather have. This might doesn't simplify anything. I don't know if it actually makes that problem harder or not, but I keep hoping when I see software that seems like it needs something like this, what I keep hoping is, man, I sure hope they have like a pound include sort of directive in their config format. And, so you have like a conf.d style of like, boy, I sure hope this software supports something that you can just give them a folder and they'll load everything in the right order. But that is not always the case.
No. I think probably more often than not, it's not the case. It depends, granted, like the framework and the platform and everything, but yeah, it's so this might be something we could do. I think what I'll do for now is I will leave the needs discussion on it. I'm going to throw this into plan build for now. And there's a feature label on it. This is more than likely going to be a lot of Rust, I would guess.
It's hard to know how this gets implemented. Yeah. I guess the runtime component, if it's straightforward, is going to end up being some bit of handlebars and stuff. So that there would be some Rust to drive that part of the supervisor. But how you would potentially need to describe this if it becomes non-trivial, that's a little harder to know. Is that something we can do at build time for you, or have some of that at build time, or?
Most definitely.
Like that's where I look to. Maybe it's like a hook helps you to do this work somehow.
Yeah.
But we just don't have anything exactly like that yet. So that may be like the right decision, or that's using the tool we have for a totally ridiculous, like using a hammer to open your car door or something like that might not be the right thing. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, unless you're just driving one of those cars that has a hammer for a key, right?
Hammer car.
Yeah, which is certainly not a thing, hopefully. So I'm going to add a comment onto this issue just to kind of hopefully in a concise way just kind of sums up the thoughts there, or just at least prefaces that like this is accepted, but we need to think about what shape this would take, just like the other one. And other than that, I think we did it. We got through all of the issues for the week. So great job, everybody. For everybody who's on the stream or watching the stream or watching the videos later, thanks for taking the time out. If you made it this far, you're a real champ. So thank you. And we will see you all in 7 days. So thanks, everybody.